The most recent agriculture ministerial of the BRICS, headed by India, was concluded virtually in August 2021. The meeting concluded with the adoption of the 2021 to 24 action plan, calling for more South-to-South cooperation amongst the BRICS countries to diversify agri-food systems to increase farmers' incomes. This year's theme was BRICS Partnership for Strengthening Agro-Diversity for Food and Nutrition Security. The BRICS Agricultural Research Platform will be used for more collaborative knowledge sharing. Previously, the Agriculture Ministerial Meeting of the BRICS, held in 2019, called for greater agriculture information sharing with a focus on extending digital solutions, ICTs, and technology transfer in agriculture. Efforts to raise production and protect food security were also the focus. However, the policy track adopted by the ministers is often not publicly debated and faced with domestic oppositions within the countries. The regional plans also most times miss out on the agrarian realities and specificities of the countries involved and lead to adoption of one fit for all pathway, often bypassing the contradictions. In the recent past, we have seen a slew of neoliberal reforms in agriculture undertaken by the BRICS countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has posed further challenges on agriculture, supply channels, and overall food security world over. This panel today will present perspectives on agriculture policy directions undertaken in the BRICS countries, the responses by the governments to tackle the fallouts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the agriculture sector will be one of the major focuses of this session. The panelists will critically engage in these issues and also speak about the various forms of resistance against the brazen neoliberal reforms. Our first speaker is from Brazil, Fabio Tomaz. He is a member of the National School and National Coordination Committee of the Brazilian Landless Workers Movement, or MST. Brazil's landless workers movement began in 1984 by occupying large landed estates or latifundias. The movement seeks land rights for landless workers and social equality in rural areas.
To start about the impacts of COVID in agriculture, of course, we have different kinds of impacts. No, in one hand, there's something that could seems like a contradiction, but we all know that it's not a contradiction. No, Brazil during the last years had reached new records of production in agriculture, especially in soybean. But at the same time, the hunger had increased in the population. About 50% of Brazilians had the rights of access to food treated in somehow. And we now have something about 19 million Brazilians that have severe situation regarding food access. So the pandemic created a few new scenarios, but in essence, it only deepened the inequalities of the system itself. In this sense, we, the peasants, we were very affected by the increase of poverty itself, because peasants, traditional communities, fishers, small farmers are the poorest among the poor. In some states, for example, in Brazil, the income of these parts of the population is 25% the average income of Brazilian society. Also, we had impacts in the food fairs or the street markets where a lot of peasants sell their production. With these markets closed because of the pandemic situation, it was one more impact in families' income in general. Also, with the economic crisis that came with the pandemic situation, we have a big devaluation of our currency. The real is the name of our currency. We have a big devaluation of its value. And as we have an hegemonic agribusiness model, it raised the price of food for all population. Of course, as agribusiness is a model for profit and not for producing food, or even less, healthy food, the agribusiness sector wants more and more to export and receiving dollars and not focus on the internal market. So at the same time, we have increased production, we have lack of food in the internal market, because our currency is devalued and they want to earn in dollars. So the price of food really exploded here in Brazil. As an example, the consumption of meat, that's part of the Brazilian cuisine and what people really eat. The consumption of meat in Brazil is the lowest level in the last 25 years. I don't know if reached international media or something, but we have big lines in Brazilian cities where people are buying the bones to cook the bones to eat, or the rest of meat or food, and people are not throwing out the food, but they are just selling what used to go to garbage, and people are just, so the hunger increased in Brazil during the pandemic. We have in other governments before the coup, before Michel Temer and before Bolsonaro, we can say the Workers' Party or government who have a different understanding in the role of BRICS. We have reached situations of not having the severe hunger in Brazil, but we are just going back. We now have all the same situation from the beginning of the 90s here in our country. So it's very complicated. Everything that the pandemic affects the poor affects more the peasants movement. So you can see we have difficulty to produce, we have difficulties to sell, and as we have difficulty to sell, we have difficulties in income, and we have this raise of prices of everything that we need in a daily basis. So this is one, these are and this happens just because we have this hegemonic agribusiness model, though. So we are producing a lot more, but we are having lack inside our markets because the crisis put the priority for not going to the internal market, but selling the commodities to gain in dollars. But moving also to the second point, because we can understand more this if we understand, and it's fundamental to understand how the government responds to the pandemic. And it tells a lot in the case of Brazil about agriculture, because the response of the federal government was based in the false dichotomy between saving lives or saving the economy. In the understanding of Bolsonaro government, the two things could never go together. And of course, he prioritizes saving the economy. Of course, it didn't work. We are in a deep, profound crisis now, But in the sense of having to choose between lives or the economy, the government denied all the possible ways to fight the pandemic, denied even the pandemic situation. So the government denied the existence of the virus, and then the how deadly could be this virus, how really it could spread, and it's the whole denial of science that is part of the ideology of the federal government that we have now. So the government thesis was based in this so-called collective immunity by contamination. So if the virus is spread the maximum possible, in a certain moment, the population will be immune faster, and then everybody can go to work and will not suffer anything in the economic level. This is why I highlighted like the main thing of the virus. No, so Bolsonaro's government act to spread the virus. No, and it created a battle in Brazilian society. The negationism versus science, and it involves the press. This battle and tensions with the state governments, and of course using the social media. That is something that is very, we know that these right-wing governments, the authoritarian governments, use a lot the social media, the fake news. So we have this chaos created by the government during the whole pandemic. For example, we said that in the beginning of the pandemic, he said, Bolsonaro have a public speech where he said, we're going to have the maximum of 800 deaths. And now we have more than 600,000 deaths in Brazil, officially, because we know that the numbers are higher than that. And of course, as you spread more the virus, what we have among the deaths is new variants of the virus. There's one variant that starts in Brazil and now is also worldwide. But one other thing that's important to understand how government respond to the pandemic is that the government used the chaos in the pandemic moment, the chaos that the government itself creates, to go deeper in its political and economical agenda. The new impulse for neoliberalism and authoritarianism. So we have a lot of, because most of the attention of society was in the pandemic situation, in this chaos that he created, denying the pandemic, and he used it to pass a lot of changes in labor laws, saying that the people must choose or to have rights or to have employees. But in one of the areas where the government really push is related to the attack on all kinds of environmental regulations, which is totally linked to the agribusiness model. Deforestation during this period was insane in Brazil. Just a few data to share with you. In 12 months, we have 9,205 square kilometers of deforestation and 1,654 square kilometers in only 1 month. And of course, that the focus of the deforestation is on the Amazon region, and as so is an attack to the indigenous and traditional communities who are those who really protect the environment, the biodiversity. So what's happening during the pandemic, it's a massive process of land grabbing and the privatization of land in Brazil. And the expelled of traditional communities and an attack to indigenous community and peasants and small farmers at all. This explains how agribusiness itself is one of the pillars of support of Bolsonaro government here, and how it helps. It had helped founding, including the attacks on democracy, on science, on spreading misinformation, etc. And the propaganda machine of agribusiness here in Brazil is really, really strong. So, of course, that there are a few contradictions between Bolsonaro's government and parts of the agribusiness sector. It would really take time to explain. Maybe in the Q&A in another moment we can talk about their contradictions, but at the end of the day, they are part of the support of Bolsonaro's government. So in front of this situation, this impacts in the agriculture, the response of the government, what we do as social movements, as popular organizations here in Brazil. We put a lot of tasks to ourselves. First of all, it was to protect people. As the government was against any actions to fight the pandemic situations, is denying the pandemic, we put ourselves in the defense of science, We make a lot of efforts in defense of the health workers and other essential parts of the working class that could not be in quarantine. No, because government didn't give support to anyone. And one thing that that helps a little was that the Congress was able to approve against the interests of the federal government, now with a lot of social pressure, a financial support for some families. No, we put ourselves to help to build these actions, but of course it's not enough. But it was something that we put a lot of effort to help to build. No, and with pressure of Brazil, of society, and with kind of political will with some state governments, we could also help to start vaccination. So the vaccination didn't start from the federal government, start from some state governments. And of course, we start vaccination later than it was possible in the federal government, if the federal government really wanted the vaccines, and with a lot of discoordination in national level. So we didn't reach the levels that was possible, no? But as a peasant movement, that the history of fighting food sovereignty, we have these histories of fighting, food sovereignty, for food sovereignty. We also put ourselves to fight the increasing hunger. So we created this process that we call productive quarantine. So we organize our territories to produce and donate tons of food for those in severe need. We are on this until today. In some regions we make these donations weekly, in others we do daily, in a daily basis, but not as a bourgeoisie charity, but under the principle of solidarity. Going to the communities, not giving them what is left, but sharing what we also lack. And sharing food, healthy food, is also the moment that we start talking with big, massive parts of society about agroecology and agrarian reform. We also were part of the effort of creating what we call people's health brigades to help people to deal with the situation, about care, educating people to fight the virus, and organizing local reference in these subjects, to all the precautions that people need and so on. But most important, we are part of this process of building and organizing how to overcome the current situation we're living. I'll just point a few. We build with society that we have to take Bolsonaro out to overcome the situation, the pandemic, the economic crisis, the political crisis, and all that. By the impeachment, if it's possible, we are make a lot of movement to try to impeach Bolsonaro. But if not, in the next elections that we have next year, and Bolsonaro wants a second term. Also, we are using this moment to denounce the lies of the agribusiness model. They say that this is a crisis, that in this crisis that we are living, it's the only sector that is sustaining the economy. And of course that it's a lie. They need this crisis to grow so they can export commodities and receiving dollars. It's all about profit for them. So the cost is to Brazilian society. It's the hunger of the people and the massive destruction of the environment that we're living in these last years. And we're also discussing the importance and the urgency of another model of agriculture. Topics like agrarian reform, agroecology, and the solutions to have healthy food and stop the environmental destruction that we are facing. And also, of course, using all the solidarity that we receive in the international level to denounce what's happening, but also to learn from other experiences, of the working class in other parts of the world. We understand that here in Brazil, we cannot move on food sovereignty in everything that we have as a project of agrarian reform and agroecology without connecting with other problems that we have that in the first moment, they're not like explicitly related to agriculture, but at the end they are. But this is something that we also have to build at the international level of solidarity. So the role of Via Campesina, for example, ALBA movement, International People's Assembly, was very important. And as part of these international efforts, also this activity that we are here now debating is part of this internationalism that we need. And so that's why it's important share with you what's happening here, but also to understand and hear from you and learn from you from other experience of what we are having.